Welcome to Jewish Physicist Responds. Today, Bezras Hashem, we'll be speaking about hidden miracles, the things that Hashem does for us and shows us that really are miracles, but they're not open miracles in a way that would violate our free will. And I also want to speak about, we just spoken about questions that why there are questions on the Jewish faith. So I wanted to talk about questions on not the Jewish faith. Right? What are questions that, at least in my experience, trouble non-observant Jews? What are the questions on secular ideology? And so we'll begin with a number of topics, a number of observations, which are technically something that you could come up with a natural explanation for, but are a tremendous anomaly and are something that can really build the person's Emunah. So I'll just kind of list these topics. There's so much, you could write a book on any one of these topics. And it's very much a situation where Hashem wants people to reflect and to think, to go around and look at the world and think about the world. And eventually, people come closer and closer to Hashem through this. And I'll list them here. As bullet points, maybe they're helpful, but certainly as ideas to explore. So these topics are, so I'll listen now. The incredible and intact survival of the Jewish people. The extraordinary, continual influence of a small group of people and their timeless beliefs on the world's morality. Our natural experience of divine revelation in Mount Sinai. Our collective experience of leaving Egypt amid miracles. The uniqueness of a nation that's not like colonial or missionizing, a nation that says you don't have to join us or look like us or act like us, and we'll even discourage it. That every nation, we say, has a valid identity and to share in the next world if a person would just follow basic morality. The sense of our own existence and free will. The peculiar and universal experience of spirituality and the soul. These are things that in a natural world would be deeply unexpected. The emergence of Shemitah. This is the biblical promise and practice of an entire nation to avoid farming for 3 years in a row on a consistent basis, every 50 years, and to survive perfectly well. The indication that enemies did not seize or plunder all of the land we left behind when all of the Jewish men, we would travel to Jerusalem, and this was 3 times a year. And the indication is that it was never seized or plundered. And this is a prediction in the Torah. The inexplicable hatred and obsession of the world with the Jewish people. The stark emptiness of Jerusalem in the absence of Jewish sovereignty, along with a bunch of other prophecies. The beauty and harmony of the world. The beauty of Torah, the depth of Torah. The ability of one underlying concept to elegantly explain many facets of the Torah. Appreciation of how intimately the Torah understands and speaks to the inner fabric of a person. Personal or family experiences which strongly indicate a hanhaga of hashgacha pratis, meaning things that indicate to a person that Hashem is actively involved in their life and in the world. The reemergence of a Jewish nation in the land of Israel and its peculiar trajectory, the things that we've seen in recent years. The reemergence of Hebrew as a spoken language, and the flourishing of Torah study. All of a sudden, at a time where religions are struggling, yet the Jewish people, the yeshivas are flourishing, and the observant Jewish community, Baruch Hashem, is doing historically well. The unforgettable goodness inherent in our tzaddikim and tzaddikot, the righteous men and women of the Jewish people. The goodness in Kedusha, meaning the holiness of an observant Jewish family when a person sees it and experiences it. A deep religious experience when visiting Israel or the Western Wall. A bright image of the Jewish future and our path towards a messianic age. Cosmological indications of God, we've spoken about some of them. The emergence of a scientific revolution as a preview of the 7th millennium, as the Ramban speaks about. This aligns with the Zohar and with the Ramban's explanation of the 6 days. And there's many more. This is just a list that I decided to put together. And Rav Aryeh Carmel writes, based on the words of Rav Dessler. I don't know if this is exact translation. I looked inside, and it could be I didn't find the right spot, but at least the concept. And he says, gratifying one's physical desire soon wanes, and the chase is on for something new. But the result is always the same. A surfeit of physical pleasure eventually causes revulsion and a reduction of enjoyment all around. But achievements of the spirit never pall. The sweetness felt in the study of Torah and the inward service of God is constant. This is the greatest and most convincing proof of the Torah, of the truth of our spiritual heritage. And so I think a person should not only treat these as bullet points in a shallow way. It's something that a person can take time and reflect on these things to do a real hisbonenus, and I think it can bring a person very close to Hashem. And these are things where like a person can come up with like a natural explanation for everything. And I know what atheists respond to these different points. I've engaged for a Tuelis, and I still find each of these to be very compelling. And I would also note that personal experience. There are people who want to say that personal experience is not a valid way to approach things. So I would know that of this list, pretty few of them are based on personal experience. But I probably in a future in a future episode of Mirz Hashem, I'll speak about personal experience and why actually it is probably the best way to approach these sorts of questions. Just a few points is that I've never seen something in the absence of personal experience, like a calculation or something. I've never seen such a thing change a person's mind, in any way. The thing is that we have the space that we're looking at is so vast. Like the amount of factors that a person can consider when understanding Hashem and trying to figure out the essence of the world, it's so broad. And the only way to do it is with an intuition. I mean, that's really, really the key. Like, a person, through their experiences, develops an intuition, and that intuition helps a person and is necessary to sort through all of the factors and to try to, figure out what is the essence of the world. I think it's just very naive to think that experiences are not a valid element. In this process of understanding Hashem, in this journey in our lives of Emunah. And this relates to something that Harav Moshe Meiselman, Rosh Yeshiva of Torah Moshe in Eretz Yisrael, said while in Baltimore. He's my friend's Rosh Yeshiva, so I came with for something on Shabbos night. And a friend of mine, someone who grew up as a secular Jew in Russia, so he came with me, and he's a physicist also, and he asked Rav Moshe, how do we know that the Torah is from Hashem and not from people? And Rav Moshe's response was, he said, look, I can give you different arguments here and there, but the thing with like just a plain intellectual argument, a person can argue one way, a person can argue another way. He said that's not the essential point. He said, what I would tell you is that it's my experience. He said, I've studied mathematics in the greatest heights. The Rav was a PhD in algebraic topology, and he studied at MIT. He studied at Harvard. He was a professor, and he said, I also studied, under the greatest, philosophers of the time. And when I studied philosophy, and the greatest, great physicists of the time when I studied physics. And he said, I've seen what the human mind can do and what it can accomplish. And he said, then I studied Torah, and it's a whole nother dimension. A whole nother dimension is how he described it. And in my experiences with physics, I feel the same way. I think like Talmud is the greatest intellectual engagement in the world. And I would say also, those who want to claim that experience is not a rational thing to bring into the picture, I would say it's better to be rational better to maybe not be rational than to be not realistic. I think they're just not realistic. But I would say that I found a study which actually very strongly supports this thing that I'm saying, that experience does affect these sorts of things. And not only that we observe that people have experiences and that allows them to move in different directions, even to convert to Judaism from something else. So the study goes like this. They say, what are the things that correlate with a person acknowledging more than they did previously a higher power? Meaning they look at people who are on a growth trajectory and people on the opposite trajectory. And they want to see what are the correlations, like what's going to bring a person to acknowledge a higher power. And so it's a psychological or like a sociological study. And so it treats like being religious as like a mental illness. Like this is the way they discuss it. But what it comes out with actually is beautiful for us. So basically, you think, what are the things that really should affect a person's way to observe a higher power? That a person is going to become more conscious of it. So according to divine justice, and before seeing the article, I wrote this, so it's not just like I'm cherry picking. So the things that should affect divine justice, or according to divine justice, are that if a person is able to control his physical urges. Right, a person achieves self-control. He starts he's a good person. He's a person that is overcoming his instincts and becoming a thoughtful and a thoughtful person with good actions. So that sort of thing, where a person overcomes his physical inclinations and obtains self-control and doesn't act like an animal. So I think that's one thing that really should allow a person to merit to acknowledge a higher power. And similarly, someone who's thinking about other people all the time, someone who's like, looks at a person and says, what does this person need? What can I do for such a person? Someone who's looking out for others. That's the other thing that would be a merit, and these are things that for anyone, Jewish or not Jewish, should allow a person to come closer to the truth of acknowledging that there's a higher power, something, greater than himself. And as it turns out in this study, there are two things that they find as the correlation. One is that a person experiences a mind-body separation. Meaning a person doesn't just see himself as a body, he sees that his mind says one thing and his body says another thing. He becomes aware of this distinction. So this is precisely a person overcoming his physical inclinations and having the ability to not be an animal. And secondly, it's that a person looks at other people and thinks about what they're thinking, right? And this is exactly the concept of, in a sense, attributing a mind to them, saying they're not just like a thing in my way, or like the person attributes, thinks about their thoughts. How's this person feeling? How's this person thinking? What does he need? So that sort of person also is more likely to acknowledge a higher power. And as we had mentioned in a previous episode, Hashem's divine justice, it has to be such that there's a certain expectation for a person, and if a person exceeds that and becomes more selfless, and becomes more able to control himself and such, so then a person is going to be more likely to acknowledge a higher power, and vice versa. If a person would do the opposite and just think about himself and just live as an animal, and so we don't know, you look at a person, you don't know what Hashem's expectation is for that person. But if you would collect a lot of people and run a study on them, and so it would seem that that is something that perhaps you could see. It says the only thing a person can test Hashem on is tzedakah, really. But this, they weren't trying to test Hashem. They were just running their study. And I think we see then that in the physical nature of the world, and they looked at a lot of factors, by the way. And these were the two that had a correlation. So I think we see in the nature of the world, Hashem has designed the world in such a way that it, people who are good people and become better people, so they're going to come closer to Hashem. When they exceed the 50-50 expectations for them, that Hashem would set. So that would be, when they use their free will the right way. I just thought that was, fascinating. Of all the factors that I could have thought, those are the two that I had listed. And so now we're going to switch gears a little bit. We are going to speak about questions that trouble the non-observant. And we're going to talk about questions on secularism. And these are things that a person could easily forget about, because a person is normal when he's in a global society. Like when everyone's doing kind of what he's doing, so a person doesn't think to reconsider in general. And similarly, a person can distract himself with electronics. But I think from time to time, in my experience with people, who are not observant, who are secular, different backgrounds, these are questions that emerge, and in many cases, I've seen people come closer to what I believe to be the truth. And I'll just give an example. I have a very close friend from college who, I met him. He and I met because I was the Jew and he was the atheist, and so we became friends. And and ultimately he arrived at the concept of spirituality, and saw it's how essential it is. And he told me the other day, I don't know if he knows the Jewish view on it, but he was like, we really need something like someone who is charismatic and good, who can bring everybody together. And he goes through this whole description of Mashiach, of the Jewish perspective of the Messiah. And similarly, my office mate at the laboratory is I'm a theorist, by the way. So as I say the laboratory, that's the place I work, but I'm in an office. So he's I think he's a righteous Gentile, and he thinks a lot about things in life, and he's this kind of person, right? I think you get a lot of it in physics, because people sometimes go into physics because they're trying to understand things and they care about understanding the world. And so he told me that after he moved into his new place, he didn't put up the TV, and he's actually going to keep it that way. He's like, I don't think we should have a TV. I don't think it's it's good for people. And I told him, in Baltimore where I live, the Frum community, people don't have TVs, mistam, and he said, what? There's a place where people don't have television? I mean, this is. And he also that same day he told me, he was like, isn't there a thing Jews rest for a day and they don't use electricity and go out and things. And I said, yeah, there is. We have Shabbos. And he said, my wife and I just started doing this thing where once a week we just stay home, we just stay in. We don't go use all our devices and machines and go out and drive everywhere. We stay in. And he said it's very good. And so it's I think Hashem puts the ability in the world for people to come close to Him. And we also have to understand that things are not purely, not only are things not purely intellectual, as we said, that everything's founded on intuition, which is founded on experience in the real world. But we also have to acknowledge that Hashem is chonein da'as. Hashem sets a person's mind up and gives a person wisdom at every moment. Without Hashem giving it, a person has no wisdom. So it makes sense that a person who, say, is a good person and thinks about the world, so Hashem is going to grant that person, if the person's exceeding, the 50-50 balance that Hashem would have expected for that person, so Hashem's going to grant this person seichel, and a person's going to become a better person. The person doesn't have to become a Jew. A person can be a good person and receive a share in the world to come. And so here are the things that I would list as some of the questions that a person would have on secularism, and questions that trouble the non-observant. I would also say one more thing, is that the laws of quantum mechanics give some probability that your wallet is currently in my pocket as you're listening to this right now. But you'd be hesitant to believe that chance is how it got there. And so we have to keep in mind, if something's an anomaly, say in Jewish history, or something, if the Jewish people are an anomaly, and if we're such an outlier, statistically amongst everyone else, and not only statistically but intuitively, so that's a pretty significant thing. The first question on the list: why do we find society to be in a delicate balance between Jewish values and Greek values? Right, we're 2,000 years after, after Hanukkah. And why are the leaders of Torah society so beloved, so scholarly, so morally refined? Rav Gershon Edelstein Zatzal, and at the same time, why are the leaders of the modern civilized world so crass, more often than not? Why do we see such refinement and altruism in yeshiva students? I spend time around people where they're, between like 18 and 22 years old, and there's no comparison. I've been on several secular college campuses for years, and there's no comparison in the students, the selflessness, the growth, the musar. It's the experience. You can't describe it. And why is there such selfishness and coarse immorality in college-age students of the same age? The sorts of things that people value, the debauchery. Similarly, why is Jewish content so clean and so uplifting? Yet the content of the civilized world, you look online at what's popular, it often descends into the lowest common denominator, which is animality or hedonism. Another area of questions: why does the world exist? It could not exist, right? This really troubled a different friend of mine. Why do we live in a world that exists in a careful balance of fine-tuned parameters? We said it's a 1 in 10 to the 10 to the 17. That's like, you take a 1 and you write a bunch of zeros. And by the time you get to a billion zeros, so now you have to take that number of zeros and write that number 100 million times. That's the kind of fine-tuning that we're talking about. We could have instead lived in a type of world that's stable. Why does physics, through this fine-tuning, point us right to something beyond our physical universe? Would it not be simpler for the universe to be self-contained? Why is there so much overlap between modern physics and Kabbalah, and spirituality? I could tell you maybe later, like 10 to 15 from Jewish physicists that write about these things. And they write very well. Why do we find so many Jewish physicists who observe such striking parallels? Is it not odd that the Ramban, based on the sages, it's in the Talmud, described that the world coming forth rapidly from a tiny point? Why does the whole universe around us have a unified beginning? Why does it no longer appear to be constant or cyclic? How did the Zohar predict the scientific and industrial revolution? Another category, why is society today discovering the importance of gratitude and mindfulness in terms of a person's well-being and happiness? And what is gratitude without the one to whom to be grateful? To be grateful for something, if there's no one to be grateful for, I guess you could say to be grateful for another person, but maybe they would respond like, well, I expect such a thing of a person, that person's doing it for themselves, right? Like this is the kind of perspectives in the world we live in. Is it really true that the glass is half full? This is how people, have to, try to look at their lives in a positive way. If one believes that it's also half empty, for a person really to believe this, psychologically, it just it's not healthy, right? Must one really lie to maintain a healthy attitude, right? If you want the person to be a person of truth, so it should be a world where a person can be honest and also have a healthy attitude. In fact, honesty should be what gives the healthiest reality, right? And so if a person is living a secular life, so they're gonna run into this sort of this dissonance that to me, if you think about it, I think it's something that makes a person think. What will be of the one who has nothing better to be mindful about than his own breath? Right? We talk about mindfulness. If a person really believes that the world is purposeless and nothing, it's difficult to believe that they're going to be in good shape. And I mean, you look today at the depression levels. Like it could have been like a joke in my life. You get to know someone, and if the person is like atheist or secular, so you get to know them well, and they'll be like, I have a secret, and they'll be like, they'll tell you they're depressed and like probably they're on medication. I mean, at least at like the higher level universities, maybe people are healthier in other places, and also the things that they would be mindful of, like worldly experiences which are totally transient. Like you see people these days just like seeking after totally transient things, and that's like all they're excited about, and it's their life, and like that's what's new to them and what keeps them going. And it's just unfortunate, like being good and creating goodness in the world, like it's such a deeper and more fulfilling and more true thing. And why should we see a society? The society around us, it's supposed to be 3,000 years more advanced than the Jews, right? And they're trying to recreate these edifices out of sand. Our edifices, they're trying to make it out of nothing. Gratitude and mindfulness, when they don't have what to work with. Another category, why is every day more work than leisure, right? A person works a large percentage of the day. And what if one fails to savor a big experience enough and it just passes by, if what you care about is experiences? Why can't one just enjoy, like vending machine candy without thinking about, one's weight and one's appearance, or the $1,000 a year he spends on it, or that moment, when there are only a few candies left, right? Like, it's just like, if people are not satisfied by physicality, and you would think that they really would be. You're going to say like, you're going to say like, have you ever studied biology or evolutionary biology? And yes, but I'm not talking like, can you give a natural explanation that's going to, you could come up with some theory to explain everything. But I'm talking, if you would imagine a world, like a natural world, all of these are just things that are so deeply unexpected. And I think they point toward, religion being something compelling. Another area, why does math exist? Why can so many phenomena be described with its formulations? I mentioned before that Rav Nachum Lansky cited Eugene Wigner's famous paper, The Unreasonable Effectiveness. Why can we successfully describe them with math? Why are we able to perceive truth so far beyond that which is necessary evolutionarily? To the point that we can map dark matter distributions within far-off galaxies and probe subatomic particles. Another area, why does Gödel's incompleteness theorem exist? For those unfamiliar, that this theorem demonstrates two things. One is that any set of axioms that you could posit as a possible foundation for math will inevitably be incomplete. There's always going to be true facts about numbers that cannot be proved by these axioms. So like you can never have something that you can really fundamentally prove. It's like it's an extraordinary thing. You can never have like a set that operates on its own. And then similarly, no candidate set of axioms can ever prove its own consistency. I encourage people, to look up the theorem. It's very interesting. You can never have something closed. You always have to, there's always, something more that is beyond your grasp. And on this topic, so my office mate said this. He said something like this. He said, so we learned to ride horses, right? And all of a sudden we can travel faster than we can run. So great, we go faster. Then we invent cars, and we're able to travel faster than even the fastest animal, the fastest that an animal can run. Then we invented planes. We're able to travel faster than the speed of sound. Why is it that there exists a speed, that of light, which we can observe but never reach, something that remains forever elusively beyond our grasp, right? Things telling us there's something that's elusively beyond our grasp. There's a Hashem. How can anyone be objective about religion when almost everyone resists self-control? Do we not have an inherent drive to seek animalistic freedom and to resist the implications of religion, as Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman pointed out? Can anyone be perfectly rational and not driven by narcissism and concern for honor? Curiosity, the desire to reinvent oneself, any category of physical desires? These are things that I plan to speak about biases in a future episode, and we'll explore this in more depth. These are just kind of things to think about a little bit. How well acquainted can any person be with his subconscious is another question. Next, why do we feel that we can choose what to do if we're a composition of mindless, purely physical matter? Why are we even conscious? As author and public atheist Sean Carroll admits, it's a bit of a leap in the face of all our common sense experiences to think that life can simply start up out of non-life, or that our experience of consciousness needs no more ingredients than atoms obeying the laws of physics. We'll continue part 2.